he actually doesn't need any introduction. He is the founding member of the Stop the War Coalition, and he was arrested on January the 18th. And I think, look, I have been in many marches, and I've been in Stewards myself with Chris during the Stop the War and other Palestine solidarity marches. And I have to say, he's one of the probably nicest stewards that you can ever meet. He's always calm, always efficient, and he was, gobsmacked when he was arrested. And what a flipping disgraceful the way they have treated him. And it's too right that we have to stand and we have to support people like Chris and people like Ben, because if the one thing I've always said, if they come for one and we say nothing, they will come for us. And they will continue to do so for one after another, and they will continue to target us, because if they can silence them, then it's easy to silence the rest of us. And this is the one thing we say in the trade union movement: when you fight, there is no guarantee you're going to win, but if you don't fight, you're definitely going to lose. So Chris, over to you, mate.
Thanks everyone for coming. I mean, I just want to emphasise that I think what happened on January the 18th, the way the demonstration was treated, was a big escalation. It was a serious attack on the freedom of assembly in this country that potentially does have ramifications, not just for the Palestine movement, not just for the anti-war movement, but for trade unionists, for anti-racist campaigners, for people who are, taken to the streets over austerity, for anyone who dissents from the direction in which our rulers want to take society. It is threatening, it is a challenge, and it's a challenge I think we have to take up. And I think the response to it so far has been fantastic, and the clearest response was the demonstration last Saturday, which was much, much bigger than January the 18th, probably bigger than the previous demonstrations as well, which was very energising, very inspiring, very, very encouraging. And I think it's one of the characteristics of this movement that despite the criminalisation, despite the arrests, despite the intimidation, people just keep on coming back. And I just want to pay tribute to everyone who's been in that process, has been part of this magnificent movement, because that is the kind of defiance that is necessary, and that is the kind of defiance that can lead us to a situation where we can win. Because I think some people would say, and I understand it after 24 demonstrations, are we getting anywhere? Are we making a difference? I mean, one answer to that question is, if we weren't making a difference, why do they spend so much resources? Why do they spend so much energy ideologically, in terms of propaganda, in terms of getting police forces from all over the country to come down and try and harass us? Why did they arrest us? Why did they risk that? Because it is a risk for them to go on the offensive against civil liberties, against the right to protest in this country. They do it because this is a movement, undoubtedly, that is threatening the establishment, that is threatening the government as it continues to support a genocide. And I think we are defending every one of the people who was unjustly arrested on the 18th of January. But it is important to say that I don't believe that the events that took place could have happened without the say-so of the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister. And I think we have to be clear, that is another sign of just how serious and how important it is. It's also a sign of how in this upside-down world of the British establishment, those of us who are marching against the flattening of hospitals, the incineration of refugee camps, the destruction of whole communities, are called hate marches by the people who are supporting a genocide. I mean, it's so twisted, as Yasmin was saying, and the very fact that their kind of justification is so contorted is itself a sign of weakness, is itself a sign that, we have the possibility of breaking through. And I think they'd only be resorting to this level of repression if they weren't seriously concerned. Of course, the exact opposite is true of this movement. This is about Palestine, but it's not about a particular identity. Our protests bring together those people from all walks of life, including from the Jewish communities, who are most appalled by the oppression of the people, who are most outraged at the merciless attacks on a people who are suffering so deeply. And in that sense, We need to be absolutely clear and proud of the fact that I think our demonstrations represent the very best of humanity in this society. And I think we shouldn't buy for a moment the argument that the demonstrations don't make a difference. But I do also think it's true to say that we need to think about escalation, and we need to think about how to take the movement forward and how to strengthen it. And here, I must say, in a slight nuanced disagreement with the previous speaker, I think unity is absolutely crucial here. Because I think the thing that they fear most, the authorities, those people continuing to support the genocide, is precisely that combination of the trade unionists, the left, the Muslim communities, the Palestinians, people of various faith groups, people from all different communities, people just coming as individuals, school students, university students. This massively broad social movement is the most important thing. Now, I think it's absolutely right and proper that there should be debates within the movement about different political strands. There should be discussions at meetings like this. That's absolutely as it should do, and we want the widest possible discussion of different political perspectives. But when it comes to the movement mobilising on the streets, when it comes to the big set-piece operations of the movement, we need to be clear that unity is absolutely essential, because to be radical really is to get to the roots of things, and to get to the roots of things in this situation means mobilising such a social weight in society that it is no longer possible for the government to continue to support this genocide. That has to be the target. And for me, the strategic aims really, I would say, are, in terms of how we can go forward, are twofold. One is, there is still a gap between the millions of people who support the Palestinians and who want to see a permanent, immediate ceasefire, and the hundreds of thousands who are out in the demonstrations week in, week out, month in, month out. We need to try and close that gap. That's the first thing. We need to constantly bringing new people into the movement. I was interested about what Yasmin said about, there were every demo, there's people who've never been on a demo before. And we need to continue that process. We don't want to just be an activist base, a very, very big activist base, but nevertheless a network of activists who just come out week in, week out. We need to be expanding the movement and growing the movement. I think we can do that. That's point number one. Point number two is, I think what that involves and what that necessitates is thinking strategically in each area about what communities, what institutions, what unions, what workplaces, what universities, what FE colleges can we get speakers into? Can we leaflet? Can we talk to? What trade unionists in your area don't necessarily send the material round about the demonstrations? What trade unionists would actually be prepared to have someone come in and speak? And I was at an event the other day when a tube worker came up to me and said, I'm branch secretary of Brixton RMT, do you want to come and speak about the right to protest at my next union meeting? We had a chat and he was saying, actually, we could probably get you or Ben to every RMT branch meeting across London, and as it happens, to the South East Committee of the RMT. Now, if you think of things like that, if you think about getting deep into the institutions, deep into the trade unions, the rank and file, making sure that we have speakers and events at universities and so on and so forth, then you have a vision of how we can move forward. And it seems to me that that's what escalation looks like, in my view, creating that social weight. I want to just finish by talking a little bit about, because no one's really mentioned it, and given that there's people coming together to talk about sort of imperialism stuff, I think it is worth just mentioning a little bit about what's happened in the last few days, because reality is moving very fast and in quite disturbing and surreal directions sometimes. That the threats, the attacks on the right to protest have taken place at the same time as Trump coming to office, and obviously the boost that gives to authoritarian and right-wing politics around the world. And, we are clearly living in quite dangerous times. Donald Trump is a mortal threat to the Palestinians, clearly. I mean, his monstrous plans, if they were actually acted upon, would be, it's almost impossible to imagine an escalation of the suffering of the Palestinian people. But you're talking about a massive, operation of ethnic cleansing that would be catastrophic for the Palestinians, but would send shockwaves across the Middle East. And you know, that is something that we obviously have to continue to campaign about, and we have to think about in terms of the upcoming demonstrations. In the last few days, he has, of course, as well, thrown a hand grenade into the whole kind of security system that has dominated Europe since the Second World War, really. And, you know, he represents a much more aggressive, brutal kind of form of capitalist competition and war. And his message to the Europeans, actually, has been clearly, I mean, it's a complete punch in the face, you know. Unilateral negotiations over Ukraine with Putin, and then, by the way, we're not going to underwrite the European defence system anymore. We're not going to underwrite NATO in Europe anymore. I mean, this is absolutely shocking stuff, and I think the way they've responded has been really shameful, to be honest. Basically, the Europeans have just said, okay, we're going to go along with this, and what we're going to do is we're going to rearm, and we're going to make our populations pay, and that's where we come in, really, because what they're saying is, and Starmer's going to be at the forefront of this, he's talking about sending troops to Ukraine as well as continuing support for the genocide. What he's saying now is that we're going to have to ramp up austerity in order to pay for increased defence spending. I mean, this is absolutely shocking. And, you know, it has to be part, I think, of a kind of broadly anti-war movement to say that is not the kind of society we want to live in. We don't want to live under a government that green lights and funds genocide. We don't want to live in a society where warfare is being put before welfare at a time when austerity is already causing misery across our world. So this is about war, it's about foreign policy, but it's also about our values. And in a country with the colonial past that Britain has, domestic and foreign policy are very, very much interconnected. And I think we have to understand that. And that's why, I mean, Stop the War, Ollie was talking about Stop the War being set up. From the very start, Stop the War was set up as an anti-war movement, but its other slogans were no to Islamophobia, no to attacks on civil liberties. And that's why the whole idea, the whole kind of slogan of putting welfare before warfare has to be so central. We oppose war, we oppose what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians, because in itself it is barbaric, in itself it is terrible for working people, but also because every penny spent on arming Israel, every penny spent on arming Ukraine is a penny that is not being spent on the kind of things that ordinary people need, on hospitals, on schools, on our social care system that is literally crumbling about our ears. And it seems to me that in the circumstances we're in, that kind of argument can actually help us to build support for the Palestinians, actually. That kind of argument can help us build opposition to war. And we do, and in that sense, I do agree that that process of joining the dots is important. So I'll just end by saying, I actually don't think building this kind of movement will be particularly hard. Because just watching the leaders of the most powerful countries on earth brazenly fund genocide has created not just a kind of passing anger in society. I think it has generated a seismic shock that has opened people's eyes to just how barbaric these people can be. And it's stripped away all the kind of liberal humanitarian veneer from foreign policy that, okay, probably didn't fool you in this room, but obviously did have some, did kind of create some confusion amongst other people. So I'd say, you know, there's nothing inevitable about the authoritarians or the right or the warmongers succeeding. I think the vast majority of people in this country actually oppose Donald Trump and what he stands for, oppose Netanyahu and what he stands for, oppose Nigel Farage actually and what he stands for. But they can make headway if we are silent or immobile. So I think we have to recommit ourselves to building the Palestine movement. And it is a tremendous movement. And we also have to send a message, I think, to our government more generally, to Keir Starmer and to the rest of the cabinet and the despicable David Lammy, that if they want to make deals with Trump, if they want to lick Donald Trump's jackboots, then that's up to them. But we will oppose him. We will oppose everything he stands for. We will oppose his allies with all our energy until we win. So stay in the streets.